The following story has been brought to you by StoriesToInspire.org.
This is Rabbi Menashe speaking. I'm a Rabbi, and I'm about to tell you something that will change your life. The last few years, I've been telling many people and groups about the greatness of learning the laws of Lashon Hara every day, and how much greatness and Yeshuas that you will have, and what a change of life you'll have in this world, and for sure in the next world. I want to start off with an amazing story, and I just want to say that it should be Ilui Nishmas from my parents, Luna Bazdona and David Ben Frida. This story I heard was from a parent of somebody in my class that happened this past year. His wife was pregnant, and in the middle of the pregnancy, they found out that the child had a very big symptom condition. It's called the heterotaxy, 1 in 10,000 heart condition, and it was a sakana. And they were shocked. They didn't know what to do. They went to Philadelphia Chop Hospital, and he asked his Rav what he should do. How this was a very big sakana. The heart wasn't shaped like a regular heart, and many times they need many operations for this. They don't know which part of the body is going to work, which not. And his Rav told him, learn the laws of Chofetz Chaim, both you and your wife. I'm not sure if he said it together. And they started learning it. I heard it, he told me the story in detail. They started learning it for 2 months. And the wife was about to have the baby in Philadelphia. The doctors surrounded the bed because they expected who knows what, how many operations, they didn't know what part of the body is not working. The baby, right before it came out, they saw in the ultrasound, it was a little bit before, they saw a miracle. What happened was, he explained to me that the lungs, the blood was supposed to come to the bottom of the heart. And the bottom part was closed. And instead, it made a change to go to the top of the heart, which was a miracle. And it has happened, but it went to the top of the heart, and it started going in, Baruch Hashem, the right way. And when the baby was born, right away the doctors surrounded the baby to see what he needs. And miraculously, every single part of the body was working, which was a miracle. And everything, and they started making tests. They couldn't believe it. No operation, no procedure, nothing. They just gave antibiotics. And this went on, I think it was 3 days, test after test. Nothing was perfect. The baby was perfect. They finally dismissed the baby. The mother left the hospital, just a miracle baby. And they had a bris. And the bris was about 2 months ago. And he told me that he said the story over the bris of the miracle birth. And he said the bris, Baruch Hashem, everything worked out. And actually I said this story about a week after he told it to me. I was telling it to a few people. I said his name actually. And all of a sudden I look him back at me, he's there. And he tells me right then and there, he says, that's him. That's the story I just said. And he tells me that he checked again with the child, and he said the baby's perfect, which is unbelievable. I said a couple weeks later, it was Rosh Hashanah time, this past Rosh Hashanah, and I was walking with somebody and coming back from Rosh Hashanah, the shul, in davening, and I saw somebody from the shul, was coming in my area, and we were walking together, and I told him the story. He tells me, you know who the wife is? I said, no, it's my sister. I was like, wow, I can't believe I tell the story to somebody. He says, it's his sister. He said, there's one more part of the story you didn't know. I said, what? He says the top heart doctor of this child was a lady, and she was emotional when she said over the story. She couldn't believe it, and she was emotional, which doctors don't get emotional, of how it's possible, such a miracle birth. And this is amazing, where they both started learning Chofetz Chaim Lashon Hara, persons that makes a little change, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu opens up. I heard another story, is amazing also. This was about 3 months ago. Somebody, my neighbor, and the mother told it to me, and then I heard the story from the son I think 2 times. What happened was, he was actually walking on 12th Street. He was with his bike, and 12th Street in Forest and Madison and Lakewood, and he was either next with his bike, and the car came in and knocked him down, and he went under the car. The car did not see him. Maybe the car was making a right turn into Madison, did not see him. He went under the car. The boy told me later that from hip to foot, he was under the car. He went a full block on Madison until finally the car stopped him, and the bike was in the front holding the car from going fast, but he was under the car going for a whole block on Madison. The Hatzalah came, came out of the car with just scratches. He got a cut in his hand, nothing. No broken bones, perfectly healthy. Miracle that nothing happened was mamish a miracle. And the mother told me she finished the book the day before. And she restarted. She said, I see, mamish, first of all, we see it. It's Chofetz Chaim. He wants life. And many, many stories I've already heard of from the past, which I said different times, where a person was saved from life from death. He was saved by what? By starting to learn the laws of Chofetz Chaim. He wants life. I had somebody a friend of mine, actually, and he actually is I'm a Rabbi, so the one who was in charge of my school, it was his brother the story happened to. And what happened was his 2 daughters did not have children for a few years. I don't know how long. And they were broken. The first 2 daughters married. Imagine, you have 2 daughters married and no kids from both of them. And I told him about, he's friends of mine, so I told him about, please learn the Chofetz Chaim, 2 halachas. And the book that I always tell people to learn, most of them is 2 books. There's a lot of books out there, but the 2 most famous ones is the Daily Companion from the Art Scroll, the blue one, from the Chofetz Chaim Heritage Foundation, or the second one is the red one from the Rabbi Dana. He wrote a book. It's a red cover with Chofetz Chaim picture. That's the literal taich, and the Daily Companion is the summary. But most of the stories I think I have from the Daily Companion, but I have a bunch of stories from the red one also. So I think he was doing the blue one. This man is a Rabbi also, and him and his wife were learning it. And in the middle of the year, I actually saw them at a wedding, and they were broken. They were like, "What? Nothing's happening. Half a year we're learning it, nothing." I said, "Don't stop. Keep learning it." And about a year later, it was Pesach time, and he sees me, and he tells me, "Yes, my daughter's pregnant." It was about a year after I think they started. And he tells me also his wife was doing it on and off, but he was doing it very consistently. And I go enough to the boy in the school. He has a son in the school. I said to him, "Let me ask you something. Is your other daughter also pregnant?" Because when the father said it over to me, I asked him about the other daughter. He was very, he didn't react. So I said to the son, "Let me ask you, is your other sister also pregnant?" And he says, "Yes." And Baruch Hashem already, one of them had a kid already, and the other one's still pregnant. And it's amazing here. They started learning it, him and his wife, and he was machazik on it. He actually tapped me on the shoulder on Yom Kippur. This past Yom Kippur, now it's a little after Sukkot, and he tapped me on the shoulder, and he told me, and he said, "You don't know, my life is a different life with my mouth." And he's a Rebbe, a choshev person, and he says, "My life is different because I'm learning it. I'm learning it every day. I get an awareness. It's not just learning it, but you're going to, okay, you'll have your shoes, but besides that, you get an awareness of, I have to be careful with my mouth." Actually, my cousin said that recently on Sukkot where I saw him. He's like maybe about 60 years old. And he told me that he says also the same line. He said, "I'm doing it like now. It's about a year and a half. He had a yeshua with his son, who was 26, got engaged after about a month of him and his wife doing it. And he said to me, "My life is a different life since I started. It's a different, my mouth, what comes out of my mouth, now I have to think about it." Amazing. You could save himself from thousands and chas v'shalom, thousands of words of lashon hara, all by learning it every day. It's not a guarantee. You still have to be careful, but it helps tremendously. When a person learns it every day, he gets an awareness and he becomes a different person from learning it, and how much he's going to get in the next world also. I want to share with you a story. I was away in this summer. We're now, Baruch Hashem, we're in November 2022, and we're in the month of Cheshvan, and I was in the summer. I went to New Hampshire. Went with my family, and I met somebody there, and he told me, I was talking about Chofetz Chaim. I tried him oilam, and he told me, he said, "I have a story for you. 15 years ago, I was in a group, and this group, we had a whole chevra. We were learning with a Rav, and a known Rav. A lot of people know who he is. I won't say his name now. I didn't ask him permission, but Lamaisa, he's known. I probably doesn't mind. But he said he was in the Rav's shir, whatever it was, and somebody in the group, Rahman al-Litzlan, got the machla. He told me first he thinks it was stage 4, but then later he told me maybe it's stage 3. He's not sure. The man was in big sakana. And the Rav told everybody in the group, you should all learn the Chofetz Chaim, the laws of lashon hara. That's the biggest zechus. That's mamish out of everything. Which I recently hear about Rabbi Galei, mamish, one of the tzaddikim in Eretz Yisrael, said that he told somebody who needed a big yeshua right now. At this moment, he says the Yeshua is only the way to get the Yeshua is from being careful with lashon hara. That is the way. So anyway, the group started learning it. They learned it separately. Each one learned separately, but the group learned it. He told me the man had a total refuah shlema. 15 years later, the man lives in Eretz Yisrael. Baruch Hashem, he's healthy. And I actually asked this man who told me this story, I said, are you still learning it? He goes, of course. 15 years later, he's not stopping. Why stop? He has a chance to save him, to get Yeshua's, become closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, be careful with his mouth, and get Olam Haba, and have greatness. And I want to tell you another amazing story, that it's a short one, but it's somebody where I teach. I'm also teaching in one of the schools in the afternoon a little bit. I'm involved in the Lakewood Cheder, and there were two cousins. They came over to me not too long ago. I think it was about a month ago. And they said, we joined together. I don't know if they were learning it together, but I think they were doing the Daily Companion, the Blue Book. And each one was learning for a cousin that didn't have children for 7 years. And I see many stories happen, even others do for you, do for that person. And this boy told me that the girl is right now pregnant. Baruch Hashem, 7 years, and they were poiled, two cousins, and it's like a group. Actually, recently, I just heard about this last week. Somebody told me he was part of a couple of people. They joined like a group to learn Chofetz Chaim, and his daughter, like about a month, I think he told me 2 months. 2 months later, just got engaged just now. This was last week. He told me. And actually, I'm getting amazing stories from every single area. I had somebody this on Simchas, this was on Simchas Torah. I heard it on Simchas Torah itself. We were dancing, and I was talking to somebody, and he tells me, this was I think before the dancing. I remember, I'm not sure when it was, during that time, he told me he knows the family. They had a child that was supposed to be Down syndrome. And they decided to learn one of the books on Lashon Hara. Actually, the one that the art school just made in English. I think it was made last year. And the husband and wife decided to learn what happened. They had a child that was supposed to be Down syndrome. They said, you know what? Let's learn it. We have nothing to lose. We have mamish. We need a zechus. And they were learning it, and the child was born totally healthy this past year. He says he knows the family was mamish, and like mamish, we'll call it an open miracle. People think, oh, I can make wonders. I had somebody call me Erev Yom Kippur. And I imagine somebody call me Erev Yom Kippur means it must be a very big, very important call about the things about Chofetz Chaim. And she tells me that her child was in the Cheder, so she knows a little bit of my stories. She says, I have an amazing story for you. She said, what? She said that she has a daughter, and the daughter was a lot of mental issues, unstable. She was in suicidal, major problems. And she was thrown out of the schools, and she had every issue. She once swallowed a pill. It was mamish sakana, the girl. And she was a teenager. And, she started, the wife and the husband decided to learn the Chofetz Chaim. And 2 siblings also started learning it. A month later, a miracle happened. She got a job, and not regular job, a good job in a place, and a job of 8 hours a day, and it was a shock. They couldn't believe it. They thought, okay, how long could she last? She's now months later, she had to call me. She was like, it was Erev Yom Kippur. She said, I gotta call you. Months later, they even added more hours. She's like working 10 hours. I said, what? Just to work even an hour was a miracle. To be able to stay with a job and do 10 hours and everything's going good. They said this is an open miracle. The family had a zechus of, and people asked, what's pshat? Why is so many stories? I even had one that was a family that knew me, and they wanted me to speak. This was Pesach time. They couldn't reach me in the end. So they said, forget about reaching Rabbi Menashe. We'll try to just learn the laws. And they had the lady had a 31-year-old daughter. And she started learning. I'm not sure if the daughter was learning it, but a few of the family members, the mother and others were learning it. And before Shavuos, she got engaged. 31-year-old daughter, engaged in Shidduchim for 10 years. And here a few ladies, mother and a few other ladies, I think it was a sister-in-law, they started learning it. And this was amazing. Before Shavuos, I think it was a week before, she was already engaged, which was amazing. A person says, what? How can it be? I spoke it was a very amazing story. I had a story, somebody called me in the summer, and he was trying to reach me like 3-4 times, like almost like desperate. So I have to tell you this great story. So okay, tell me. And I try to spread around. People call me all the time about stories. They tell me stories, or tell me they need Yeshuas. They ask me what they should do, which book to learn. And he said, this is amazing. So this man told me, he says 5 years ago, his daughter got sick, some kind of very bad virus, and it spread. It got worse and worse until she, Chas v'shalom, went into a coma. She was in Philadelphia within a coma. The doctor told him that he doesn't think she's going to make it. And he didn't know what to do. She was in a coma for 3 weeks. And he told me he was driving in Lakewood, and he had an Isaiah no Lashon Hara. And he said to himself, I'm not going to say, I'm not getting in that way. And he passed the test. And he turned to the Eibush afterward and he said, Hashem, I close my mouth. Please open the mouth of my daughter. About 10 minutes later, he gets a call from his wife in Philadelphia. You won't believe it. She woke up out of the coma. She's crying. Like, he was shocked. He said, what, 10 minutes later? And somebody added to the story, Chaim umavis biyad halashon, life and death in the hand of the tongue. Here, in 10 minutes, he saved his daughter's life. And actually, I said this story. I heard the story in the summer, in August. And I repeated the story over. I think it was the beginning of October or the end of September, around that time. I spoke in a group. I speak in different groups many times. And I spoke in a group about 30, 40 ladies, girls and ladies. And all of a sudden, I said the story towards the end of what I spoke about. And all of a sudden, a girl jumps up and she says, "It's me." I'm like, "What?" She screams out, "That's me. I was the one in the coma for 3 weeks. And my father," I'm like, "What?" I couldn't believe it. I said, "Tell your father to call me." And he called me again. I said, "I can't believe that, Shgacha." That I'm like a month later, I say the story over, and he called me from, I didn't know where he lived. I don't know where it was. And here I see the story with my own eyes. A person has Yeshua from being careful. And I wanted to tell you another story, which is just a little chizik also. There was a lady it was somebody who I teach in the cheder. He told me his grandmother was at a chasana. And this is what I'm about to say, this story. It's a small thing, it's a small story, but this is the real big reason why every single person who hears this should really learn it every day till 120. From this story, listen to the amazing story. So somebody who I teach with, his grandmother was at a chasana. So she's not young, probably 70. She was at a chasana and she's sitting with the ladies at the table, and somebody in the table started saying Lashon Hara about the kala. And like, she doesn't look nice, at the discussion. And all of a sudden this lady, the boy's grandmother said, "It's Lashon Hara, how could you say?" They stopped. And she told her grandson, who told it to me, that if I wasn't learning it every day, I don't think I would have said it. But because I was learning it every day, I was able to stop them. And they listened, they stopped. They knew it's Lashon Hara, we have to stop. And because of that, I was able to stop it, which is a tremendous message for everybody who hears this. That one of the most important things is when you learn it, you become aware of what comes out of your mouth. It becomes all of a sudden like, and it doesn't mean perfect, you still have to work on yourself, but what happens is now there's an awareness. Even if you don't know all the halachas and all the details, but there's an awareness, and that's why it's so important to learn this more than anything in the world, because this needs 24/7. You need a consistent awareness. If a person does it for 10 years and he stops, he will lose an awareness, because this is constant, 24 hours, morning to night, you're talking in phones and cell phones and computer, everything. And all of a sudden, somebody asked me a very, very, and wait, before I want to take one more line. The Vilna Gaon says a medrash, very powerful medrash. He says a medrash, and I was very inspired. I think you will be inspired by it also. He brings a medrash that says like this: anyone who holds back from saying, when he wants to say something, let's say Lashon Hara or something wrong, and he holds back from saying it, there is no malach, no angel or creation on this earth that can fathom, can imagine the reward he's going to get in the next world for one time, once in his life, that he holds back. Imagine a person learns it, he holds back. I actually remind myself of the story of somebody called me about 3 weeks ago, Motzei Shabbos. He told me, I told him I met him somewhere in a place in Lakewood, and he was very inspired by my stuff, and I gave him my USB of my stories, and he called me back. He says, "You promised me something." I don't remember. I was telling him about learning the Chofetz Chaim, and he was like in his late 20s, and he said to me, I did it. I started the Chofetz Chaim, and I said, "You know who I'm with? You know who I'm with?" He says, "I'm with my kala in the car." I did it, and about 2.5 months later, I got engaged, and now I just finished the book. And he said this line to me. He said, you don't know how many times I was able to stop saying Lashon Hara only because I was learning it, which is the message that everybody should get. It's a tremendous message that when a person learns it, he can accomplish so much in life you can't fathom. I had said in a different recording, I said that Rav Issa Zalman Meltzer, Rav Aaron Kaller's father-in-law, he wrote this and he gave a haskam and a sefer, and he wrote this line. He said that if a person does not learn this Sefer HaKadosh consistently, it will not be able to be really totally careful from Lashon Hara. He said it 50 years ago, probably. It was Rav Aaron Kaller's father-in-law. And now imagine today, it's Kol Shekain today, for sure. You need how many more times? There's so many things that you can speak to other people. Now, people have asked me, how did I start to Mechazik? Baruch Hashem, I have so many stories of this. I have stories from the last 3-4 years. Tremendous stories from, the numbers are getting so much, I could write a book on it. I'm getting stories come out almost every week. And sometimes I get 2-3 stories a week. And I'll tell you how really it started. And I said this in a different recording, but if you didn't hear it, or even if you did hear it, it's an inspiration. It really started from my daughter. My daughter went to a school in Lakewood. Actually, I'll say it, Oros Beis Yaakov. And in there, she was in 9th grade. Now she's already she came back from seminary. But at that time, she was in 9th grade. And she came back with a book on Lashon Hara. There was a group, I think Mishmeres is called. And in the book, I said, let me look at it. It's nice on Lashon Hara, all about it. And all of a sudden, I saw a letter in there. This letter changed my life and hundreds and maybe even thousands of people's lives. Be'ez Hashem. And what happened? What did it say in the letter? Somebody from Rabbi Kanievsky, Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky's wife. And what happened was, she writes, and this is the letter. This was a letter in there, and it was like part of a letter. It was a long letter, and this was part of the letter. And it said like this: somebody came to her husband. This is now she's writing. Rabbi Kanievsky is writing this. She said that somebody came to her husband and said, how come all the tzaras are happening in Israel? And he said, because of the mouth. He pointed to a Gemara. I think maybe it's the Erchin. Because of Lashon Hara in the mouth. And she says, she writes, I just recently saw a letter from the Manchester Rosh Hashiva Rabbi Yehuda Segal that promised that anyone that learns the 2 halachas of Chofetz Chaim on Lashon Hara, he promised he's going to personally defend you in heaven. Just that line itself, we should all do it till 120. Have somebody helping you in Shemayim till 120. And he said he never saw someone that did it, that didn't have Yeshuas and children, Shidduchim, Parnasa, good kids, and Refuah. And in their letter, she writes 3 stories. Somebody had 2 older daughters, came to her, she told her to do it. They both got engaged. Somebody didn't have children for 20 years. Baruch Hashem was zeicha to have a kid. And the last one was very powerful. Somebody had the machlis spread, Rachmanu litzlan, sakanas nefashas mamish. She said, everybody in the family, make a Kabbalah. The entire family together, whatever I don't know if they did it together, but they made a Kabbalah. Everybody joined together Kabbalah. They're going to learn the 2 laws of Chofetz Chaim. And the lady had a total refuah shleim, miraculous. And she writes in the letter, we have seen open miracles of people doing it. And I personally, myself, Menashe, have seen myself open miracles. Some of these stories are so amazing. We're talking about stories. People say, how do you know? Maybe it just came. No. If you hear the story, you'll see. I'm going to give you an example of a story's miraculous. This is we'll call it an open miracle. I'll tell you 2. This has just happened recently, so I'll just share. But there's many more over the years. One person, a lady, called me up. She says, I'm 24 years old. I don't know who she is. I never met her. I don't know who she is. She said she got a hold of my USB of my stories. And she said like this, my sister got married in May. I got a hold of your USB, and me and my friend, we decided to learn the daily companion together. Let's do it together. She said she started in August. She called me over a month ago. She says, I started in August. I got engaged in September. And she says, from the first day that I started till the vote was exactly 40 days. That's what she tells me. And I'm like, wow, 40 days. I was like and she didn't even know who I am. Somebody gave her that USB and she decided to do it. And I have many people just listening to USB, mechazik them, and they say, you know what, why not? And the second one, just another miracle story. Somebody, a Hasidish person, he's a Hasidish, and if you know by the Hasidim, they get married young. So the mother is friends with my wife. And she called my wife to tell the story. Actually, it was late. I think it was late. Yeah, it was last week. And he was 19, and he started going in Shidduchim for 5 years. He was 24 years old. 5 years, and it was mamish for him, tremendous service. 5 years in Shidduchim, and all the friends got married, everybody. And his mother met my wife, knows my wife, actually knows her for many years. And my wife told him, do it, you should do it, you should do it. My wife was pushing her. And then she told her son, you know what, let's learn it. And when they started learning it together, they actually lived in a different book. It's called Purity of Speech. It's also a book on Lashon Hara, has the laws there. And they started doing it. And actually, the boy had to mechazik the mother, because the mother sometimes was very tired. She said, Mommy, no, we have to learn it. And they learned it together. On day 47, she told my wife, I think it was, he got engaged maybe 2 weeks ago. For day 47, he got engaged. Now that's a miracle story, because for 5 years, nothing happens, and now they both do it, and in day 47, is miraculous. I remember once years ago, somebody called me, this is an old story, from years ago, somebody called me, he says, Rabbi Menashe, how do you know it's going to work within a year? He said, I told her, I see from my experience. I used to say it's 100%, but I say it's like 95%. A few people not, and I have a feeling that it could be. I'm not 100% what I'm about to say. Could be because maybe something you did wrong, maybe, I don't know. But Kamat, I see almost so many stories happen. It's almost a little less than 100%, 95%. And I said, how do you know? And I said to her, because I see Be'ez Hashem within the years. She said, okay. She called me a month later. She was almost embarrassed. I don't believe it. I think her husband did it also. 30 days later, 30 days, her son got engaged. And he wasn't starting to go out with the girl yet. And 30 days later, but Maisa, Baruch Hashem, there's a lot of stories in Yeshua's. And everybody who hears what I'm saying, there's a tremendous chusim in everywhere around. I'm going to continue with some amazing stories. One of them happens to be with somebody in Lakewood. It's interesting. This is about a month and a half ago. I was walking on Shabbos, and I saw somebody I knew in Lakewood. And I was about to tell him about Chofetz Chaim this, and he smiles to me. He said, I want to tell you something. He said, what? I don't really know him so well about his family. He tells me and my wife started doing it during this year. And 3 of my kids got engaged. 3. I'm like, wow. 2 of them already married, and then all of a sudden I turn around, he says, and this one, she's a kala. And I'm like, wow, 3 in 1 year. And he was smiling. I don't know how many years they were in Shidduchim. But in Shidduchim, Kemat, I have over 100, probably over 120 stories of people from every single age. Kemat, the oldest one was in the 50s. I have people 47. The family did it. A sister-in-law, I think it was, with a son, was doing it for an uncle, 47. Somebody from the Cheder. Also, I don't remember how many months. It was 4 months. Also, no, I'm sorry, it was about a year. It was about a year. They got engaged. I'm just doing some random stories, but this is the next story I'm going to share with you. A great story. There's a family, I'm not going to say which city because people figure it out. One time I said it over and some person said, I know that person, so I don't know if I like to say the names. So unless they give me permission. Anyway, so what happened was there was somebody that came over to me in the summer and said, I have a story for you. He says, my mother was pregnant many, many years ago. I think it was 10 years ago, maybe 13 years ago. You'll see. And the doctor said, similar to the first story, one of the first stories I told you in the beginning, the doctor said, you're going to have a Down syndrome child. Now, if somebody says that, it's like, well, now you will say 95%, 97%. There are chances not, but very, very rare. And they decided they were really broken. They wanted a regular child. And they flew into Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. And he told me, you'll see, it's his brother. It's going to be a boy. And they went to Rabbi Chaim, and they asked Rabbi Chaim, listen, this is child Down syndrome. Is there anything we could do? We'll do any mitzvah in the world. They said no. Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky Yechezkel told them 2 things. Number 1, let's say maybe they knew it was a boy. Number 1, name the child Yisrael Meir after Chofetz Chaim. Wow. Number 2, you and your wife learn the laws of Chofetz Chaim. He didn't say 2 halachas, he just said learn the laws of Chofetz Chaim. And they did it. They decided to learn it, and they started learning. I don't know how many months before or later, but the baby was born totally healthy. The boy right now is in 9th grade. I heard it last year, I heard in the summer he was in 8th, and right now he is in 9th grade, and Baruch Hashem, healthy as can be. I actually said this story once, and I said the city, and there was a lady that says, I know the boy. She knows the whole family. Like, what? Like, so it's mamish, a story, a very powerful one. And I'm going to tell you another one. This is amazing. A couple of years ago, I went to get a haircut. And I met somebody I know over the years, and I told him I'm a Chofetz Chaim. He told me he also told me a story. I didn't know he's going to do it, but he got excited about my story, my things, and he decided to do it. He later on got his wife and family, but he really started himself. And at that time, I think it was about a month or two later, his 28-year-old son got engaged. It was amazing. I said that story already years ago. This was a couple of years ago. Anyway, I recently heard, I got a call from him. Rabbi Menashe, I got a story for you. I'm like, what? What is going on? I was excited. I said, called him back. He said, let me tell you. He says, and he was doing it I don't know how perfect he was doing it, and his daughter was doing it. And all of a sudden, he tells me, my 26-year-old daughter just got engaged. I said, I gotta come to the fort. I gotta get all the details. Now, she's not married yet. I think maybe she got married. I mean, it's this time already. And I come to the fort just to find out more really the details, because I don't really know him so well. And I come in and I said to the Kala, I said, listen, can you tell me a little bit more about what you did? She said, I'll tell you. I was on and off, but the last 4 months, I was solid. I did straight 4 months, and the 4 months is the calendar. The Menashe Shiva made a calendar, and he said, I want that calendar to be put in my grave. I heard already from students. One of his students is already famous. This thing that they put the calendar in his grave. He said beferish that this is my passport to Olam Haba. He made a 4-month calendar 3 times a year. You could do it 30 times in 10 years, and he said that's my passport. And he was a big gadol. The disciple going called him the Amarat Tefillah of the generation. He was a big Rosh Hashiva, tremendous, great person. And he said, what was his biggest zuchus that he did in life? Made a calendar. He pushed himself, made sure the 4 months that everybody should learn it, and he constantly pushed people, told them, please do it. You'll have Yeshuas. And how many stories of people that had Yeshuas? Actually, one thing, this is a side point. It's not a really Chofetz Chaim story, but it's just a side point. Somebody had called me up to get a USB. I went to his house, and he said, the father tells me, I was close to the Menashe Shiva. I was like a Ben Bite a little bit, and he said, when my son was born, I had big problems in the hospital, problems with the baby. I called the Menashe Shiva. I said, what should I do? He tells me, don't worry. The child's going to be perfect. Everything's going to be good. And he's going to get married. And right now, this moment, actually, he's in Shidduchim. This was already now, he's a little older, he's like 30, 31, and he says, and he's in Shidduchim right now, 31, maybe a little drop more, and he's in Mamash Shidduchim, and they right now, Baruch Hashem, and Mamash, he sees Mamash Baruch. But that's a side thing, just to bring out the point where you see people have Yeshuas. This is interesting, I had a couple of stories in one day. This happens a bunch of times. Sometimes I have 2-3 stories in one day. It's not usual, but I have sometimes. This was about a month ago. It was Erev Shabbos. I went somewhere in a store in Lakewood, and all of a sudden a girl sees me, and she says, my brother got engaged 29. And it's because of Chofetz Chaim. I said, oh yeah, and I started remembering it. What happened? This was already, I think it was in September time. What happened was, on Pesach, I had passed by the parents' house, the father, I had to do something there. And I told the mother some of my stories. She was inspired. And she and her husband did the Chofetz Chaim book in English, whichever, I don't know which ones. And they started Pesach time when I told them. And in September, the 29-year-old son got engaged. And she was telling me excited. And later on I met the father. He made a little joke. I don't know what he meant, but I said, which book? I told him. I asked him. He says, all the books. I don't know what he meant. Maybe he meant a bunch of books. And the same day, I passed by a place. And I was all of a sudden a guy's trying to call me. Somebody wants to tell me something. I go over to him. He says, you remember you said your stories of your 3 kids, how they got engaged? You told me that when you told your wife asked, how come it didn't work? And I told my wife that if the reason is because you have to do it, and I offered her some jewelry if it doesn't work. And 6 weeks later, my second son got engaged. 3 weeks later, my first, and 6 weeks later, my daughter got engaged. You remember that? You said to everybody. So I heard your story. And I also have 3 kids. And I decided to start. I think his wife also. And now he started, I think it was in the middle of the winter of last winter. He started, and now my 29-year-old son got engaged. Imagine 2 29-year-old stories in one day. He says, now that's the first of my 3. That means he started Pesach, and I think it was September. His first of the 29-year-old son got engaged. And actually, I just saw him this past Friday. He tells me in a few weeks is the wedding. I think 3 weeks is the wedding. And I'm like, Be'ez Hashem, he's going to get the next 2. And this all from you have your zechusim. Now, I try myself personally. I try to spread it out. I'll just give you advice. Whoever listens to this, I'm going to ask you a little favor. If you ever had any Yeshuas, somebody had come to my house on a Shabbos, this is a few months ago, and I was asking him, what should I do? How should I get it out? And he told me a beautiful, beautiful line. He said to me, he was also very smart, people pay him for advice, and he said to me, tell anyone who gets chizik from this, anyone who gets inspired, or he has Yeshua from it, tell him to spread it out to others. Tell him to tell his brothers, his uncles, his aunts, and this way, if 10 people hear this and get inspired, 10 people get 10 people, that's 100. And little by little, what you're going to really accomplish in the end result, this I'm adding now, is we're going to save millions of words of Lashon Hara. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to cause the gula. Why? Because the Chofetz Chaim, I said this in different recording, the Chofetz Chaim said that when it says that sinas chinam is what caused the second base of Mikdash to be destroyed, he said if it's because of the Lashon Hara, he brings a raya, the sinas chinam with Lashon Hara. If it wasn't for the Lashon Hara, the base of Mikdash would not have been destroyed. So imagine now, enough people learn it, all of a sudden there'll be a tremendous zechus, and the redemption will come. The geula will come because what? Because there'll be more people doing it, more people being careful. I try to spread it out. I was making an ad in the Lakewood Shopper. Actually, I made it somewhere in one of this place. And I also heard a great story. Somebody had a Yeshua, amazing. Somebody had called me from what I made when I was making the ad. Somebody had called me that somebody had a sister. The lady told me she had a sister. And she had a sister that had major seizures. The daughter, the child, I think it was a boy. The boy had a major, I'm not sure if it was a boy or girl, but the child had major seizures. And the one who heard about my stories, that she told her sister, maybe you should do Chofetz Chaim. And she told her husband, and it was a Friday, and the husband says, you know what, let's mekabel. They will accept it upon themselves to learn the laws of Lashon Hara. They just accepted. They accepted themselves to do it. And they accepted to do it. And what happened was the seizure stopped on a Friday. And this lady, the sister, called me up on Tuesday and said, we don't believe it. It's amazing. The seizures have stopped. This is just one shot. And then I went to a different place, also something like this, a different type of story, but I went to another place where I try to spread it wherever I go, Be'ez Hashem. And there, a lady, I told my stories a little bit, and she actually told me the next time I saw when I had to go to this place, she said, it's amazing. Me and my husband we heard your USB, we started learning it. And we have somebody that we know that has the machla, and the doctor gave up on her. And we decided, let's learn it. One day we learned it, and we heard the message. We heard a message that the new doctor took over the case and says there's still hope. Which is amazing. Even one, that's amazing. We just had one. Now, I just mentioned about the Kabbalah. It's very important. People don't realize when a person accepts himself to do something, you can change world, even though you didn't even do it. There's a lot of a lot of proofs from other places, but I'm going to tell you just one or two stories just to show this. This story I just heard now. I heard it today's Sunday. I heard it at the end of the last week. I was somewhere. I was at a shiva place, and when I passed by, somebody said, "Oh, Rabbi Menashe." He recognized me. He didn't really recognize his son was in my class, so he started talking to me, and he said his brother-in-law has a child that was diagnosed as deaf. And the brother-in-law and his wife decided, let's mekabel, accept upon themselves right now. Let's learn the laws of Lashon Hara. Let's mekabel. They didn't even open the book. And they took a retest. It must have been not so. They were hoping that, and they took the retest, and the test came out that he was not deaf. Which is a miracle, mamish, on the spot. Like, well, okay, you'll say there was a mistake, but Lamaisa, just a Kabbalah. And make a Kabbalah, you can make a change with a Kabbalah. Actually, this is another story that just happened last week. I was passing by a place, there's somebody that has a store in Lakewood, and I schmoozed him, I tried to tell him to learn the Chofetz Chaim. I wasn't sure if he doesn't. He told me, obviously, I was passing by, I looked at him, I said, is your daughter engaged? He tells me, yes, my 26-year-old daughter engaged. I said, did you do it? He tells me like this, he says, I was on and off, but one thing me and my wife did. He took his hand and he put his finger on his lip. We both decided to close our mouth. No more Lashon Hara. That's it. Now that's a strong Kabbalah. If people say, we want our daughter to get engaged, we are going to close our mouth. and shut it, close it, that's powerful zechus. That is a major zechus, because that shows HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what, you want to change your life? That's a change. So really, the ikr, I always tell people about learning it, but the Maisa, that did help in that situation. And it's really amazing when people try, I'm going to tell you now a story, and I'll even tell you the date where I heard it. It was on June 10th, 2022. And I had this story. I went to a lady, called me up. She wanted my USB, my stories. She says, I have 3 great stories. She didn't say great. I just add the word great because you'll tell me. I'm not sure which one is the better one, but all 3 are amazing stories over her life at the time. Now it looks like this lady, I wish she would do it. I hope she's doing it now for good, because I was trying to push her. No, start now and do it till 120. Because you'll see in the stories, she was on and off, but you'll see how she had Yeshuas. One of the stories she said happened 10 years ago. She said she and her friend did not have children. I'm sorry, she had children. I'm sorry, I apologize. She and her friend had a hard time having children. And they both decided, let's learn, I think it was the Daily Companion, let's learn the laws of Chofetz Chaim. And they both decided to learn it. And they both got pregnant. And they both had babies. And this is 10 years ago. And she told me that she and her friend called the babies Chofetz Chaim babies. That's one story. The second story was this, I think it could be the most amazing one of the 3, that it was her child was in the hospital. I think it was Philadelphia. I'm not sure which hospital. I'm not sure. Maybe not. It was one hospital, and it was Erev Yom Kippur. The doctor told her, you have to go to the hospital. He had some kind of rash that looked sakana. And she was getting tests in the hospital, and it was Erev Yom Kippur. She said, I want to go home. It's Yom Kippur's tomorrow, and she was going crazy. And she said, Hashem, if you help my son, everything go good and be negative, and we go home before Yom Kippur, she made like a promise. She's going to learn the laws of Lashon Hara for 1 year. And about 5-10 minutes later, and a little while later, a doctor she never saw before said, listen, we did the test, your son, it's negative, go home. And they went home, and Mama, she couldn't believe it. And the third one was that her father-in-law was very sick with corona, was Mama's major sakana. They didn't think he's going to make it. She came home, and she said to her daughters, we got to learn the book. We got to learn the laws. They opened a different book. I'm not sure if it was a lesson today. And one of the books, she said she picked the day that's in the middle of the book, I think the day of that day, and she continued learning from there. It was about 2 months or so, maybe 3. And when she finished the book, the father-in-law came home. And Baruch Hashem, today he's all good. Which is a miracle. People think, I remember I said in a different recording in the Cheder, a bunch of stories where people had corona, when somebody had corona, and the father and mother the parents, the 5 uncles and aunts of this grandfather, the grandfather had corona, and the children, the 5 uncles and aunts started learning it for this boy's grandfather, and he came out of the hospital, he got mamish had a refuah. And he first came home, and then he recovered in the house, and somebody else also had grandparents, they were also in Sakana, Baruch Hashem, they learned it. So there is a tremendous koyach, a person, and also barabim. I'm about to tell you a story. This is amazing. Sometimes I want to actually start with this story. This is a really great story. I said in a different recording, about somebody that I know, that he was very inspired. He's a father of one of the kids. He was a father of the kids that I had taught. And he was very, very inspired. And he decided to tell others, he was machazik others, and he told me that his niece started learning with somebody else. The niece was learning for her aunt, together with another lady, with a sister. They weren't related. Just one lady, they were learning it together. One was learning for her aunt, and the other was learning for the sister. They learned it together. He tells me 40 days later, both girls got engaged on the same day. This is a true story. He told it to me. I know his name. I just don't want to say it Barabin, but he said that story. So he told me in the recording, he said he knows also a Rav. I'm not going to say also the story. He knows the Rav, and this Rav made a group of learning Chofetz Chaim, and in the group he was learning Chofetz Chaim Be'iyun, and he had about 5-6 people that daughters got engaged. One was 25, one was 32, one was 23. Okay, that's what he told me. So about 2 months ago, I met this Rav. I would love to say his name. A lot of people know who he is. And I asked him. I said, I heard about what you did. You made the groups, and you had so many Yeshuas. He says, that's nothing. I had somebody in the group that had the machla. He made a Suda Hodah, Baruch Hashem, he recovered. Somebody didn't have children, she's pregnant, and somebody didn't have Parnasa, and Baruch Hashem, he's doing good. That means even when you do Barabim, it's very powerful. I've told this to people, that if you want a big miracle, get a lot of people together, you'll see miracles. I can't guarantee for sure, but I would say more chance yes than no, because the miracles happen when there's a lot of people joined together. Like I know right even now, I'm telling people that told me very big stories of tzaros they're going through. I said, get a lot of people to learn, even get family members. Even sometimes some families that don't have kids, that a lot of people don't, even people hearing stories of people that had 4 or 5 people in shidduchim. Anybody who's listening to this, get the rabbin to do it, you'll see miracle things happen. I'll tell you where I was in Satmar in Lakewood. And this is amazing. I tell people there, when I do, as I try to tell some people there about learning it. And there was somebody there who was very inspired from me. And I gave him the USB. I think I went to his house. And a little while later, I couldn't believe I see him back. He tells me, my daughter got engaged from it. I said, what? He said, yes, less than 2 months later. Now I think now she's already married. But and he says, my daughter, me and my wife started. And I told him, are you stopping? He said, no way. And he actually told me a svara why it's Poel Yeshuas. Why does it make miracles? He said because the Zohar Kodesh says, Chofetz Chaim brings, that when a person says Lashon Hara, he's metama, he makes impure his words, and what happens is his tefillah stays in the air. It just stays in the air, it doesn't go. So he said like this man told me, he said, that's what the Zohar says first. He said, this man told me, so now when a person learns it, he never learned or he did learn it, and he starts feeling bad for what he did all those years, thousands of words, chas v'shalom of Lashon Hara, all of a sudden he's doing tshuva. He's repenting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All of a sudden, all his tefillahs that were in the middle of the air opens up and goes to Shemayim. And that's what happens. A person goes up. I'm going to tell you just a couple of cute stories, but it's not just big things, even small things. A person told me his sister lost a diamond ring. It was a Thursday. And Thursday night, late at night, she decided, I'm going to learn Chofetz Chaim. Well, why not? It helps for so many other things, even for this. A little while later, she looks in her little kid's purse. She thinks of looking at it, and she finds her diamond ring. I even had somebody, this is an amazing story. I got a lot of chizik from it. It was a story within a story. I have a son and my son-in-law. One of my 3 kids that got engaged, because we were learning Chofetz Chaim. So my son-in-law, his brother, got engaged a few months ago. Miracle. He was in his early 30s, and it was a beautiful shidduch, Baruch Hashem. They're going to get married soon. And when I was there, I found out my daughter, and my son-in-law told me that they learned it for 1 year, and he got engaged. And in there, his father-in-law told me a great story. He said a very good story. He said when he was younger, many years ago, he was at a bris. And he was at the bris, and they named the baby Yehuda. And everybody's wondering, what's this Yehuda? It was a family that didn't have children for many years, and the man gets up. He says a beautiful, cute story also. He said, everybody's wondering, why did I call this boy Yehuda? Why did I call him? I want to tell you. He says, the reason why I called him Yehuda is because of this story. He says, me and my wife, we didn't have children many years. We decided to go to the Manchester Yeshiva in England, his kever, and daven by him, his kever. We went there, and my wife looks at me. I think they probably write down in the kever to try to learn 2 halachas. I don't know. She turns to her husband. She says, you know what? Maybe we should learn the 2 halachas. So the man he says it's Rabbi. He says to the people there, he says, you know what I told my wife? Number 1, I have no time. Number 1. Number 2, even though it takes only 3 minutes a day, about 3-4 minutes, doesn't take more. He says, number 2, I like to talk. So she looks at him, she says, isn't it worth to give that up to have a child? And he's masking. He starts learning it. He says, me and my wife learned it. My wife got pregnant afterward, a little while after, and this baby was born because of our learning. So I said, why not learn? Why not call the baby? Because of him. He's the one who caused it. We did it because of him. We're going to name him Yehuda. This is the story that the future father-in-law of my son-in-law's brother told me. He told me a few months ago. And actually, I'm getting a lot of stories from all over. Somebody was 29. I still remember him coming over to me. His daughter was 29. And he goes over to me, because of you, somehow, my daughter got engaged. I said, who are you? I don't even know who you was. He tells me he heard some of my stories I spoke somewhere, a different place. I couldn't believe he heard my speech. And he got inspired. And then his son said, let's learn. He came from Eretz Yechezkel after Pesach. He got his family to learn it was on. He got engaged first, and then later on, his daughter got engaged 29. He doesn't know for sure if she did every day, how much, but the family was inspired to learn it and to be careful, to be mechazik, which is powerful. A family can mechazik, can do wonders. My neighbor's cute. He loves the art scroll. The new art scroll came out with English and footnotes, very nice stuff, on the Chofetz Chaim. He said he was on day 80. I think in his late 20, maybe 26, 27, and he got engaged just recently. He didn't get married yet. I was walking by somewhere, and a guy tells me, I got a story for you. I'm telling you, I get stories so amazing. He said his chavrusa had a daughter trying to get into seminary. Now, if anybody hears this and knows about seminary, you know that you got to apply early. And she did, and she tried, she wasn't getting in. And this is already May, June, July. I think it was in July time, June, and nothing was happening. So the guy told his chavrusa, why don't we add a little learning of Chofetz Chaim to our learning? It's a beautiful thing. Anybody who's listening to this and he does the Daf Yomi, it's amazing to add 3 minutes to your Daf Yomi. Your life will change. Already you have the zuchus, you're learning the Daf and you're learning the Torah of the Eibishter, which Chaim said that also that a person should learn, said a person should add the Daf Yomi and add a little bit of 3 minutes of Chofetz Chaim. That will change your life in 3 minutes. So they said, let's add to our Seder, and they did it. I think it was a month later, he didn't tell me the exact, about a month later, this girl the daughter got into seminary, the one that she wanted. It was a miracle. And already July time, June, July, she got into the seminary. That was for her. Actually, I told people have told me, they heard the story, somebody asked me, can you please get me, will it for sure get me into the seminary? If it's for you, it'll get you in. The zuchus, I've told in another recording, I said the boy's in 8th grade. Anybody listen to this in 8th grade and you want to get into Mesifta? So I've told this to hundreds and hundreds, Baruch Hashem, and I believe in her, I haven't heard not. And I tell them, if you do Chofetz Chaim, and you learn every day, and you're mechazik on saying Yehei Rabbi with Kavanah, Yehei Rabbi, let Hashem's great name, Mevarach should be praised, the oil mamah, forever and ever this world, Mashiach HaMahaba, and you think it, say it loud, strong, you will get into the Mesifta. That's for you. And I've had this constantly. I have stories about it, but I'm not going to get into it now. I just want to bring that point out. Now, many people have told me their life changed. And this is very important. A lot of people, they say, oh, you have Yeshua's. Forget about Yeshua's for a moment. Let's say everything is going perfect in your life. Every single thing. Baruch Hashem, you married your kids, or everybody's going good. But what about your life, yourself, right now? How is your life? When a person learns it every day, his life is a different life. I'm not saying every single person learns it. There are people maybe doesn't get as affected, but 95%, maybe 98%, there's an effect. Something happens to you. Some people get changed total. Then many people have told me their life changed. I remember one person I gave the book to. I gave a person the book. He asked me, give me the blue book. I gave it to him. A few months later, I saw him again. I said, how's the book? He looks at me with a straight, serious. He says, a different life. And somebody else had a similar story also that he was in his mid-60s and he had actually come, I didn't really know him. I didn't know him at all. And he had come in and he ended up getting the book. And I met his brother later on. He says, how's your brother? He says, that book that he has, it's like that's mamish, that's his life. He changes his life. It's mamish. Makes him a different person. And many people have told me that a person becomes, changed. There's a Rav in Lakewood. And he doesn't give me permission for sure because he told me himself, I can't tell you much. He said to me something amazing. He said, he heard my stories, there was machazik from it. He said, I have 3 Yeshuas this past year. I can't tell you what it is. Probably maybe his kids. I don't know the details. I don't know him really personally. He tells me, but I know him over the years. I'm Baruch Hashem, a special Rav. He told me, I have 3 Yeshuas, but I can't tell you. 3 Yeshuas? And he's a Rav. 3 Yeshuas, probably his big thing. And a person has tremendous greatness. A person learns it. You could do a thing. It's funny. I sometimes have a bunch of stories. One day, I was going to a store in Lakewood. I was passing to one of the stores there. It's Judaic Plaza, and I forgot one of the Judaic stores. I forgot the name. And I was there in the store. It was on James Street. And I come into the store and I was telling the owner, the one who's in there, I don't know if he's the owner, whatever, the one there, I was talking to him about my Chofetz Chaim, he likes it a lot, and a guy hears this, he says, can I have, and I was talking about USBs, can I have one of the USBs? I said, okay, no problem, I gave it to him. He calls me, I think it was the next day or that night, I think it was the next day. He says, you don't believe it, I have some kind of, whatever his job was, he didn't get a customer in 4 months. He says, I started the one night. I got a call from somebody. It was the night before, that night itself, and he's my customer. He wants to be a customer. I couldn't believe it. And I can make money 4 months, nothing, no new customers. And he did it one day. He told me, I couldn't believe it. I just gave him a card. Even goes so far to even Canada. People need a green card. I don't know. I just met somebody. He just told me, I did Chofetz Chaim for Canada. A green card. I did it, and Baruch Hashem, I was able to get in the mail. A lot of little, it's not just, people like small things. It sounds funny, but a stutterer. Somebody had a kid with a stutter, and he told me, the family, whatever, they did Chofetz Chaim, and Baruch Hashem, the stutter got much better. And actually, like a week later, somebody asked me, can it work for like a stutter? And I told them this story. It works in all areas, because once you put that effort, HaKadosh Baruch Hu does it. He says it's very, very powerful. Once a person does it, we can many stories from all over. When a person does it, he can mamish make changes. And now I'm going to end off. I'm going to start ending off just a little bit more, just a couple more stories, just to and then I'll give it end off. There's somebody that I know in Lakewood. What was it? I'm sorry. Let me say it like this. Somebody in my class last year. The mother told me the story. It's amazing. Actually, I get stories from people in my class. I'm a Rabbi in the morning, and this person's the mother told me her brother was renting a place, basement. And they started learning Chofetz Chaim. I'm not sure if it was Daily Companion. Her husband and wife were learning it. And about 4 months later, they finished the book, and the owner says, you have to leave. I said, okay. And they said, instead of looking to rent another basement, let's see if we can buy a house. This was a year ago. And they ended up finding a great house, a Mitzvah house in Jackson. They bought the house, and you know how much it is now. And they bought the house. They moved into the house before the second 4 months. And he's learning in yeshiva, and I don't know if he has any. I don't think he has money. The sister said it's a miracle. I don't know how my brother did it. I have no idea how my brother did it. And that was one lady, and another. I think it was the same day. I got a story from another lady. She told me her mother had some kind of growth, and they were very worried. The mother says, "I'm learning it twice. Once in the morning, once in the afternoon. I got to be extra careful." She did the testing, Baruch Hashem, everything was not the machla, and she's still learning it. And then this girl told me also she has like, I forgot the details, also like a brother-in-law, a sister-in-law, brother-in-law, somebody in the family that had the machla, and the Rav told the person to learn it, and Baruch Hashem, the machla went away, and they're still learning it, and Baruch Hashem, everything is okay. But Baruch Hashem, I have many stories. It's a cute one. When I teach in the Cheder, there's somebody I know. He gets inspired in my stories, gets inspired. And he came over to me about 3 weeks ago. He told me a story that I couldn't believe it. It's amazing. He went over, I wouldn't do this, but he went over to a 41-year-old man. And he said, if you do Chofetz Chaim on Lashon Hara, you will get engaged. Now, I'm afraid 41 is a little older. I would say good chance, but to say 100% sure, he said 100% sure. He was fact. He told me a month later, he started learning it. A month after he started learning, he got engaged. Now that's powerful. See, I can't say always in that situation, but I'm starting to see tremendous bracha and tremendous greatness. When a person starts learning it, things happen. And everybody who listens to this, I hope you get inspired. Please try to spread it to the world. We're mamish holding by tremendous greatness in the world right now of things happening that we can mamish ma'or the world. Now is the zaman. A lot of people think, how much can I do? I'm only one person. I learned over the years that one person, one action can change. We even just had now Parshas Noach. Noach did one carbon, and the Eibush said, I'm not destroying the world. What? One Maisa. Could you imagine? One Maisa changed the whole face of the earth that there will never ever be a Malbah. What can we do today? Today, right before the Zman of Mashiach, now we can bring Mashiach. Anybody who listens to this is the Zman. Start. You will change. Cause others to be careful. The Mikar is also to be careful from Lashon Hara. Why say it? The Chofetz Chaim brings from the Chofetz Levavos, when a person says Lashon Hara, his mitzvahs, it depends how bad it is, but the more worse it is, he says, your mitzvahs, some of your mitzvahs go to that person, and his averis go to you. Person could give up many of his hard-earned mitzvahs just because he said some words. Why say it? Protect yourself, learn it, and even if you mess up, chas v'shalom, but the Eibush sees you tried. You know what a zechus? I mean, you could say, Hashem, I tried my best. The Eibush says, okay, that's a zechus, as a zechus from you. The Rishon Solanta told the Chofetz Chaim when he was thinking to write the Sefer, he was feeling, is people going to learn, and how far? Rishon Solanta said, if a person person learns it and he feels guilty and he still says Lashon Hara, it's kidai to write the book because already the Aveira gets less. Even that, to stop the Aveira, you have a power to change the world. Anybody who listens to this, you can change the whole world. Even one person. Actually, a lot of my stuff that I mechazik, Baruch Hashem, a lot of people, came from one boy. A boy in the Cheder was mechazik, started about a year and a half. He made a hotline. If anybody wants to listen to it, it's a lot of my stories in there. I'll tell you the number anyway now. It's 641-715-3800 is the hotline, and the PIN number is 419-200#. He says he made this hotline about a year ago. He asked me, can I put my recordings? And that's how everything started. All the things that go around the world now, Baruch Hashem, it all started from what? From a boy. One effort of he wanted to do something good, and now thousands of people, hopefully Baruch Hashem, all around, we're trying to get the whole world b'siyat shmai to learn. And you, whoever is listening to now, please, you can change the world, and you could bring the geula. Don't think you can't. It's not true. There's a ma'aser of the Chofetz Chaim like that. He said from the Arizal's time, he says you can't imagine what one davening can do in the world in this manazeh, because it's much later, it's much greater than what even the Tanoim and Moraim could do, and that was in the Arizal's time. And the Chofetz Chaim said that also in his time. Imagine today, in 2022, in Tashim Pei Gimel, and how a person can change the world just from learning it. And Be'ez Hashem, I give a bracha to everybody who's listening to this, that we should all, Be'ez Hashem, dive into the Eibishter to bring the Gula and learn the laws of Chofetz Chaim and get the world to mechazik it. And Be'ez Hashem will be Zeicha for a Geula Shleima, and have all Klal Yisrael together and build the Beis HaMikdash in front of the Eibishter, and Eibishter will say, my children, thank you for bringing me home, finally.
Enjoyed this story? Come again. Bring a friend. StoriesToInspire.org